Disclaimer statement. I am an equal opportunity hater of all organized religions or institutions of any government or corporation, public or private, involving an authoritarian nature sanctioning the abuse of children. This example of the Baha'is is one I just so happen to have experienced. As such, all of you enemies of the Baha'i faith who wish to exploit this story and further the persecution of the Baha'is, especially the Baha'is of Iran and other Islamic countries, be it known that I do not support your efforts at all. I still maintain the Baha'i faith is a beautiful, revolutionary improvement over the vast majority of Islamic dictatorships and Western Judeo-Christianity, churchianity, insanity. The problems I have with the Baha'i faith largely involved the fact that the Baha'is I was raised under while growing up as a child were completely under Stockholm Syndrome from abusive forms of Islam, abusive forms of Western Christianity, churchianity, and Judaism. The apple does not fall far from the tree in all the evil that goes on within the great Abrahamic de-evolution of organized religions. For you so-called Baha'is who claim another sect of the Baha'i faith, separate from what you consider to be the Haifa or Mount Carmel administrative order with the 9-male-member Universal House of Justice, I do not have any solidarity with your efforts to exploit this story for furthering your splinter groups attacking the mainstream Baha'is. Your versions of the Baha'i New World Order are no improvement. Your versions are no improvement whatsoever. I am a non-Baha'i who happens to have some respect for exceptionally heroic, altruistic people of history and still consider Baha'u'llah to be a person to have lived an exceptionally heroic, altruistic life relative to the shithole that Iran and the Ottoman Caliphate was in the 19th century, and in many respects still are to this day. But at the same time, I see Baha'u'llah as an individual who lived a very mortal, flesh, bones, and blood human life, who had some shortcomings like everyone else does. So please do not exploit this as some kind of proof the Baha'i faith is evil, but rather as a classic example of how organized religion fails 101, at least traditional organized religion as most people know it today. From 1977 through 1984, the Baha'i community of Milwaukee, Oregon, USA, along with certain individuals from neighboring Baha'i communities of Clackamas County and Portland, were criminally negligent with some of their children. I was raised in that Baha'i community from that era, and now I am an adult survivor. The world needs to know of where the Baha'i faith failed. This is an account in general terms what went wrong so that those deluded into thinking the Baha'i faith necessarily somehow has some kind of exceptional integrity over any other organized religion will have good reason to think otherwise. For legal purposes, unfortunately, I am not ready to name names and be too specific. But those people responsible for this criminal negligence know damn well who they are and know damn well who I am and exactly who I am referring to, and will know damn well that no bad deed goes unpunished. I am sure it's not that difficult for law enforcement to eventually figure out all parties involved eventually, as they are well aware of certain individuals I've made reference to in my contacts with them in the past. A clear message to the world needs to be sent in cases of child abuse. I do not forgive. I do not forget. These terrorists do not deserve forgiveness nor to be forgotten, at least not in my lifetime. All great scandals, especially child abuse scandals within organized religions and other institutions, stem from emotional and economic disparity. This disparity always involves poor people groveling to wealthy people and emotionally desperate people blindly following charismatic predators. Among the wealthy and charismatic predators are any combination of either predators or complacently naive, sanctimonious, conceited people. The snobby, stuck-up yuppies who everyone trusts, who cop cheerful, pleasant, Pollyanna attitudes, are often far worse than the predators themselves, if they are not overtly the predators themselves. Their deluded, condescending arrogance is the worst form of terrorism. There was a perfect storm of at least 3 different families from 1977 through 1984 in the Baha'i community of Milwaukee, Oregon, USA, suffering from some kind of God-forsaken, beginningless, multiple generational abuse or trauma, where the adult guardians and parents of those families were completely naive and unaware of any kind of notion of teaching their children appropriate boundaries of privacy. This insanity, this pathology, this tragedy, this fucked up situation, this shit that goes down, this terrorism known as child abuse can be described in many psychological buzz phrases or jargon, which includes groupthink, post-traumatic stress disorder, predictive programming, social engineering, mind control, brainwashing, trauma-based mind control, multi-generational trauma-based mind control, Stockholm Syndrome, dissociative identity disorder, PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, which I already mentioned, post-traumatic slave syndrome, post-traumatic slave disorder, cognitive dissonance, cult indoctrination, cult hazing, addictive, compulsive, obsessive behavior, and many other names, labels, diagnoses, and words. In colloquial terms, adults who failed their responsibilities to children are all people who bury their heads in the sand. These people bury their heads in the sand. These people buried their fucking heads in the fucking sand. And the end result was distressed, poor, and desperate parents thinking nothing of abandoning their children to be the prey of predators. In the summer of 1984, at the pleading request of an overworked, underpaid, workaholic, demoralized, slutty, divorced, single parent of 2 boys, a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old, consensual custody of the parent's 12-year-old son was given to other Baha'i families nearby in Clackamas County, and then finally to another Baha'i family living in Portland in September 1984. Both of this child's parents, the Baha'i community of Milwaukee, Oregon, the Baha'i Spiritual Assembly of Milwaukee, Oregon, and many other consulting Baha'is from neighboring Baha'i communities could not understand why the 12-year-old boy was harassing his 9-year-old younger brother. All of them failed to consider why this 12-year-old boy was harassing his 9-year-old younger brother. None of these people considered this 12-year-old was left alone with certain perverted older kids of the same community periodically since 1977 through 1982. 1977, the same year when Jonestown was established. In the summer of 1984, the 9-member local spiritual assembly of the Baha'i Faith of Milwaukee, Oregon, collectively buried their heads in the sand at the notion that this child suffered from the Milwaukee Baha'i community's own criminal negligence, especially during the years 1977 through 1982. The adult Baha'is of these communities who buried their heads in the sand were almost exclusively white or Caucasian upper middle class and middle class first generational Baha'is, people from the baby boom generation and sometimes a little bit older. These people were not Persian Baha'i immigrants. The Iranian Baha'i immigrants seem to congregate in very affluent and opulent neighborhoods in the western hills and suburbs of the Portland metropolitan area, while the great Baha'i communities across the United States and Canada were lamenting the great Iranian Islamic dictatorship of 1979 and the horrible persecution of Baha'is going on there at that time, with all sorts of money drives to support the Persian Baha'i refugees. The adults who I knew as Baha'is turned a blind eye to the real child refugees in their own damn country right here in the USA. They all collectively buried their fucking heads in the fucking sand. These idiots and assholes buried their heads in the sand. They all collectively buried their fucking heads in the fucking sand. These idiots and assholes buried their heads in the sand. They buried their heads in the sand. They buried their heads in the sand. Within 9 months, this troubled child from Milwaukee, Oregon in 1985, at the age of 13, was soon tossed from a custodial Baha'i family of Portland to his other parents' custody in spring of 1985, and then again in 1986 to another custodial Baha'i family, where he lived for another 2 years until the summer of 1988, when he was 16 years old, and then finally back to his desperate, working class, overworked, underpaid, clueless parents' home, temporarily remarried in their desperate attempt to put a band-aid and heal the wounds they were too fucking stupid to ever give a fuck about, until the child crawls through high school, graduating in 1990, barely knowing a damn thing about what he's supposed to do with his whole adult life ahead of him, but still clinging to the hope that Baha'u'llah was going to rescue him. What makes criminal negligence of children so devastating within all organized religions or any kind of institutionalized bullshit is the great trend and sales pitch that somehow, by groveling to the extroverted, wealthy, charismatic, aggressive representatives and leaders of that religion, the economic successful who have material wealth, there is somehow an opportunity of better future family life from the shithole, dysfunctional family life from whence the economic refugee victims came from. A child from the desperate poor families, a vulnerable victim to predatory abuse, is extremely suggestible and in real fear of his life and the inevitable stigma, knowing damn well he will never be adequately considered the innocent victim, hiding his abuse well into adulthood because he knows damn well he will have to endure stigma and be blamed for abuse that was entirely not his fault whatsoever. This abuse of denial of all those around him is far, far worse than the initial abuse. Some of the great child abuse scandals exposed in my lifetime, which I feel the utmost solidarity with, include the Roman Catholic Church and all the churches of Western churchianity under the Stockholm Syndrome of the papacy, none of whom give a damn about any true Jesus, the Penn State football coach Sandusky case and cover-up, the Franklin cover-up, Boys Town conspiracy of silence with the whole Johnny Gosch and Paul Bonacci story of Bohemian Grove, Hot Data Garine, Jersey Shore of the UK, all the juvenile correction and care facilities where abuse occurs, with a special shout out to the courageous work of anti-child abuse activist and filmmaker Bill Maloney of the UK of Pie and Mash Films, the Jimmy Savile scandal